Airbus, Boeing, and the old European carriers are suddenly holding emergency meetings. The boardrooms that once set the rules for African skies are in shock. For decades, Western manufacturers owned the narrative, and the supply chains, the spare parts, the licenses. Then, from a dusty hangar in Ouagadougou, a silver fuselage pushed its way through the doors and rose into the Sahel sky. No Airbus logo, no Boeing stamp, no French approval. Burkina Faso unveiled what its leaders call the country's first fully homemade airplane. Questions explode. Who built it? What does it actually do? Is it a symbolic prototype or a functioning aircraft that can change African aviation forever? In this video, let's unpack the truth behind the spectacle. It began as a whisper, a rumor traveling through the dusty alleys and university corridors of Ouagadougou. A few students claimed to have seen blueprints. A mechanic swore he had repaired an unfamiliar engine part that didn't come from abroad. But most people dismissed the talk as fantasy. Burkina Faso, a landlocked nation known for its mines, revolutions, and unbreakable resilience, wasn't supposed to build airplanes, not in the world's eyes, not in the shadow of giants like Airbus or Boeing. Yet within those whispers lay the first stirrings of something extraordinary. Not just a technological project, but a cultural awakening. For decades, Africans had been told that progress came with conditions. Patents had to be borrowed, technology had to be imported, and innovation had to be approved elsewhere. The global order had subtly reinforced the notion that engineering brilliance was a foreign trait, something to be received, never created. And then one morning, that illusion shattered. When the day arrived, it wasn't heralded by the international press or lavish ceremonies. There were no Western executives cutting ribbons or giving speeches about partnership. Instead, it was raw and real. A crowd of ordinary Burkinabe citizens gathered near an unassuming hangar. Farmers stood beside engineers, students beside elders. What they were about to witness wasn't just a machine. It was proof that their country could defy gravity, both literally and symbolically. The hangar doors creaked open, revealing the silver gleam of a sleek, handcrafted aircraft. For a few moments, the crowd stood frozen. Silence hung heavy in the air, not the stunned silence of disbelief, but the reverent stillness that follows a miracle. Then, with a roar that cut through the desert wind, the plane moved. It accelerated across the runway, wheels slicing through dust, and as its nose tilted upward, it carried more than its own weight. It carried the pride of a nation that had dared to dream without permission. In that instant, something lifted off that was much larger than metal and wings. African imagination took flight. The scene was simple but revolutionary. No sponsorships from Western firms, no IMF observers, no imported blueprint. It was Burkinabe engineers, technicians, and thinkers who had done what many said was impossible. In that act, Burkina Faso rewrote one of the world's most powerful unwritten rules that innovation in Africa must be authorized by someone else before it can rise. But that day, Africa didn't ask for permission. It built a runway instead. While the unveiling itself was emotional, the shockwaves stretched far beyond the runway. To the untrained eye, it was just one aircraft. But to anyone who understood industrial ecosystems, it was the seed of something transformative. Even without verified technical data, the plane's potential roles were clear. Its light body and adaptive frame suggested utility, the kind of design that could serve multiple national purposes. In a region where vast distances separate towns and road infrastructure remains underdeveloped, the aircraft could revolutionize civil mobility. It could shuttle medical supplies, transport small groups of passengers, or carry agricultural goods to markets previously unreachable by road. A turboprop design, capable of short takeoffs and landings, would be ideal for the Sahel's rugged terrain and remote airstrips. Beyond civilian transport, the plane's existence hinted at another layer: security autonomy. For nations like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, whose borders span deserts and conflict zones, a homegrown aircraft could serve as an invaluable surveillance and reconnaissance tool. Outfitted with sensors or cameras, it could patrol frontiers, detect illegal mining or trafficking, and replace the costly Western drones that often came with strings attached. Even more important, though, was the technical chain reaction this aircraft could ignite. A single plane means little in isolation, but the process of designing, fabricating, and testing it creates ecosystems, from metal workshops, composite material facilities, avionics integration labs, to pilot training centers. Those aren't just industries, they are knowledge centers. Each component produced locally becomes a skill learned, a dependency severed, and a foundation for future technologies. In short, the aircraft wasn't just a vehicle, it was a catalyst. It represented the first step toward aviation independence and industrial diversification. It turned engineers into educators, mechanics into designers, and students into innovators. One successful flight could multiply into decades of capability. And all of it stemmed from one idea: build it yourself. But this idea didn't appear from nowhere. It was born from the political philosophy of one man, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Under his leadership, Burkina Faso has shifted from a model of foreign dependency to one of internal creation. For decades, African development strategies revolved around loans, consultants, and imported expertise. Health crises meant foreign doctors. Security challenges meant foreign trainers. Infrastructure meant foreign investors. Traoré changed the equation. His government asked a question that had long been forbidden: what can we make on our own? That question became a policy. Technical institutions began receiving funds. Engineering programs expanded. Research centers were established to experiment with local materials. And crucially, Burkina Faso started refusing foreign aid that came with restrictive clauses. It wasn't isolationism, it was self-definition. The result was a culture shift. The young engineers who built that plane weren't just executing a project, they were manifesting a philosophy. They were the physical embodiment of Traoré's belief that leadership begins with confidence, not compliance. The airplane was more than metal. It was the manifestation of a mindset that African nations can build, not just borrow. For generations, Africans were told that brilliance had an address, that it lived in Silicon Valley, Toulouse, or Berlin. The unveiling of this aircraft marked the moment that illusion expired. The hangar in Ouagadougou became a new address of invention. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. As the plane touched down from its maiden flight, applause erupted across the field. But outside Burkina Faso, the reaction was far more complicated. In Western capitals, the event triggered an unusual mix of confusion and unease. That's because, for decades, Western dominance in Africa was preserved through subtle architecture, like patents, certifications, academic monopolies, and financial systems that made technological independence nearly impossible. It was never about brute force. It was about ownership of the process. Every African invention had to pass through Western approval to gain legitimacy. Every piece of critical infrastructure came with intellectual property embedded elsewhere. But this time, that chain was broken. Analysts in Paris, Washington, and London quietly began asking questions. Who funded it? Who provided the components? Was there foreign military involvement? Their curiosity was not purely academic. It was defensive. Because if one small African nation could build and operate an aircraft outside the Western industrial ecosystem, it would set a precedent that could spread faster than any treaty or revolution. In European defense circles, this wasn't just an African success story. It was a disruption. Western contractors and diplomats began seeking partnership meetings under the guise of cooperation, but with the intent of containment. The goal was to understand it before it inspired others. Behind the polite diplomacy lay an uncomfortable realization. What had just taken off in Burkina Faso might land next in Mali, Niger, or Guinea. And if those nations followed the same path, local creations supported by regional alliances, Western influence would lose its leverage not by war, but by irrelevance. That quiet panic made perfect sense. The Western aerospace industry thrives on predictability. For decades, Africa's aviation needs meant steady revenue for Airbus, Boeing, and their maintenance subsidiaries. Airlines leased Western jets, relied on imported spare parts, and sent pilots to Europe for certification. That was the system, and it worked for everyone except Africans. Now that system was cracking. A homemade aircraft in West Africa disrupted not only the market, but also the psychology of dependency. Western firms feared a new kind of customer, one who no longer needed to buy at all. Intelligence agencies, too, were paying attention. Independent aviation programs are always of interest because they can evolve quickly. A light civilian aircraft today could become a tactical surveillance or cargo platform tomorrow. The question wasn't whether Burkina Faso would militarize the technology, but whether it could. That potential alone made Western policymakers nervous. Diplomatically, new offers began surfacing. Collaborations, joint ventures, and promises of assistance. But those offers often came wrapped in fine print. Clauses that would give foreign entities influence over production, testing, or intellectual property. Traoré's administration, well aware of the old tricks, politely declined. Now, perhaps the most powerful outcome of this story isn't the technology itself. It's the mindset it inspires across the continent. Already the ripple is visible. Guinea is reclaiming its mining sector and forcing foreign firms to sign fair contracts. Mali is rebuilding its defense infrastructure independently. Ethiopia is constructing dams that power its own destiny. Tanzania is investing in local vaccine research, reducing reliance on imported pharmaceuticals. Individually, these actions may seem unrelated. Together, they form a pattern, a silent rebellion against dependency. Do you think the West fears African innovation or fears losing control over the minds of Africans? Isn't it true that even after decades of independence, the very structure of every institution in Africa depends on the West, and there is a need to get rid of it? In the comment section, share your thoughts on what else Ibrahim Traoré should focus on to make it at home and be independent. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring videos on Black Africa, its history, rich arts and culture, and things the world should know about. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.